Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn. I'm Lauren Smith with the International Franchise Association, and we have a great 30 minutes lined up for you. Before we begin, 2 housekeeping notes. We are recording today's webinar and we'll make it available later this evening on community.franchise.org. If you have any questions for today's speakers, please add them to the chat box here and they'll be addressed towards the end. Today's topic is how to take advantage of podcast advertising for your franchise, and it is brought to us by Audiogo. Here to provide today's discussion is Ian Murphy, Senior Manager of Business Development at Audiogo. Thank you, Ian, for joining us today, and thank you, Audiogo, for sponsoring today's Lunch and Learn. I'll go ahead and turn things over to Ian.
Thanks so much, Lauren. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for taking the time here to learn a little bit more about how you can really take advantage of this new opportunity that is podcast advertising, both for your franchise or as a franchisee, how you can tap into it. So with Audiogo, we make it very affordable, very easy. I'll show you all the great details here of how to kind of take advantage of it. And we'll also talk a little bit more about kind of what are some trends in podcasting and how to kind of go about podcast advertising and the different options out there. So we'll jump right into everything here. All right. So yeah, just some contact information, our website, audiogo.com. You could always send me a note at ian.murphy@audiogo.com, and I will be the sole speaker for today. So with that, we'll kind of hop into everything here. So here's what we'll touch on today. First, we'll talk a little bit about, just what is podcast advertising, and we'll give a quick table setting of really what are podcasts and what does the podcast space look like today. Then we'll touch on the different types of podcast advertisements, the different placements, different ways to go about it. We'll talk in kind of some trends there. We'll also talk a little bit about why you should advertise on podcasts, why it's effective, and why a lot of marketers are really turning towards the medium. And then lastly, we'll touch on why you should use Audiogo for your podcast advertising and really how you can take advantage of streaming music and podcast advertising in general with Audiogo. So first, what is podcast advertising? And so as of today in the US, podcasts are actually the #1 growing form of entertainment. And so podcasts, while today it's a quickly growing medium, they had very humble beginnings back in 2004 was when the first podcast show aired. It was really much so a hobby project, niche audiences. You could imagine one host or one or two hosts with a few folks turning in. Really, no one had any idea it would turn into what it is today. And so kind of fast forward a bit, in the past few years, podcasts have really gone mainstream. I think anyone on this call here, a good chance you've probably listened to a podcast or have a friend or family member who are very interested in podcasts. And that's because of really part of it's really the rise in mobile device consumption, people tuning into smart speakers, really just streaming in general. People are spending more time listening to audio on average. In the US, people spend 4.5 hours every day streaming. A large part of that is podcasts. And I think another big piece of why it's grown is there's really a lot of great content out there now on podcasts. There's all types of, almost anything under the sun has a podcast led by a subject matter expert. And combine all these things, and podcast adoption is absolutely soaring today. And there's always new shows coming out. A ton of people are streaming. And again, as of today, there's over 114 million podcast listeners in the US alone. And so, as a marketer or as a franchise and a franchisee, how can you reach new customers? This is actually becoming a great medium to do so. As you can imagine, the more time people spend streaming, the more time people spend on podcasts, it just becomes a better marketing channel every single day. And so with a new kind of wave of products out there, really, how as a franchise can you take advantage of this opportunity and reach listeners? So that's kind of a little bit on what what is kind of generally speaking podcast advertising. Next, wanted to talk a little bit about the different types of podcast advertising out there. And here I'll kind of touch on kind of what, as an advertiser, kind of where the trends are headed and the like. And so when you think of a podcast advertisement, you might immediately go to what's called a host-read ad. So kind of like the name implies, this is either a pre-recorded or a live promotion that's read by the host of the show. Some folks directly think of something like a Joe Rogan podcast and the different products that he's mentioning in his show. So that's what a host read ad is, and those are great. The great thing about host read, it's literally an endorsement from the host. So it's a great way to go about it. The tough part is with host read ads, it's a bit difficult to get set up. It can be very time consuming in terms of coordination. You have to work individually with each show that's relevant to you that you want to advertise on, and connect with the host, connect with their marketing teams, kind of negotiate a deal. So there's a lot of coordination there. And also it can be very expensive. Of course, if the host is actually going to be endorsing the product or service, that can come at a fairly high cost, again, because it's that direct endorsement. So with host read ads, while they're absolutely great, they convert great. And that's kind of typically what people may think of when they think of podcast advertising, or at least historically, can be a bit time consuming and expensive. Another thing to point out about podcast ads are the different placements for ads. So there's pre, mid, and post-roll ads. And so these, of course, are the kind of different places in a stream. And you might know this as a listener, where you've heard the ads before, kind of before the show starts, during the show, or after the show. So that's one thing to consider. And then another type of podcast ad, or really the kind of technology behind the very last point there, is this dynamic insertion. So this is the use of software to automatically insert ads into kind of existing podcast audio. So you might hear an ad that sounds maybe more like a radio ad, or an ad you've heard elsewhere that kind of pops in. It's not necessarily read, it's not read by the host. That ad's being dynamically inserted in. And actually, that's kind of where the trend is headed for podcast advertising and podcast ad buying, is kind of shifting away from host read due to the sort of time consumption and the cost, towards more programmatic advertising. So programmatic advertising, of course, it allows you, it utilizes dynamic insertion. So the ads are being inserted into the streams through software. But the great thing here for programmatic advertisers is you can actually advertise on multiple different podcasts with that one message at a relatively affordable cost. So that's kind of one way how Audiogo is able to help you do that. And there's another thing to point out here too. There's other programmatic advertising options out there to tap into podcasts. Some platforms, however, have, let's say, a $150,000 to $200,000 annual commitment, so it's very expensive. That's where Audiogo, we're, at least as of today, we're one of the few platforms out there, potentially one of the only platforms, where you can actually advertise programmatically on other podcasts or on podcasts for as little as $250. So you could tap into this without breaking the bank. And this is also something where, as a franchise, and we do this with other franchises all the time, is we actually can really help with local franchisees and their local marketing through podcast advertising. So we could, as a group, we could work with you to come up with a pre-approved, brand-approved script for local franchisees. They could then input their local information. We can help them produce the ad, and then we could programmatically advertise on behalf of your franchisees in different areas across the US on podcasts. So very, very powerful in terms of kind of the medium and how you can reach new listeners, and really helps you stand out in your community as well by not only promoting offline and online and kind of the typical places, but also through audio, and specifically through podcasts. So those are the different types of podcast advertisements out there, and different kind of placements. So now that we know a little bit about, what is podcast advertising, the different types out there, how the trends are shifting more towards programmatic to allow it to be more affordable, easier to set up, and easier to use. Now we want to touch a little bit on, why should you advertise on podcasts? It's all great that, we know what they are and the different types, but why is it beneficial? And I think before I kind of get into the stat here, one thing that is important to think about, right? It's really kind of where people are spending their time, right? As I mentioned, on average today, Americans spend 4.5 hours every day streaming audio, and that only is increasing with the rise of smart assistants, things like Siri, smart speakers like the Alexas of the world. We're really starting to kind of ditch the keyboard and talk and listen to our devices more, and podcasts are a huge part of that. That's really where people are spending a lot of time. And like we can see here, 41% of the country is tuning into podcasts every single month. And in the last 12 months alone, growth in the podcast space in terms of listenership has gone up by 11%. So even today in 2021, 2022, people are still really turning to podcasts and adopting this medium very quickly, and it's only continuing to grow. The growth is the fastest kind of in the audio space. And like I pointed out before, it's really the number one growing form of entertainment out there. So one reason why is it's kind of where people are spending a lot of their time, right? Another piece of it is podcast ads make your marketing memorable. So with audio in general, just streaming music, Nielsen actually did a study here kind of comparing audio ads to display ads. And that included streaming music and podcasts. And overall, audio had a 4.4x higher brand recall compared to display. And I think a big part of this, when we think about when we're listening to a podcast that we're interested in or listening to our favorite music, right, we really make a strong emotional connection there. We feel something related to this content. It's something that's interesting to us. And so as a franchise or franchisee, if we can reach someone on, in that moment with the right content, with the right message, while they're listening to something that they feel very strongly about, it really goes a long way, right? And I think that's a big piece of the brand recall is we're quite literally in these listeners' ears, and we're making a really strong emotional connection with them. So that's why there's just naturally a higher recall with audio than display. And then of course, podcast listeners convert, right? All those things kind of tie into the statistic that I mentioned before. But another study done showed that 60% of listeners have purchased something after hearing a podcast ad. So that's very, very powerful in the sense that a majority of people who hear an ad on a podcast while they're listening have made a purchase. And again, that really goes back to people trust the content that they hear while they're listening to their favorite podcast or while they're listening to a podcast that they're engaged with. So there's a really strong connection there, and it even translates to direct new customers. And that's why I think as a franchise, particularly if you have local, whether it be representatives or local agents or local locations, this could be a very powerful medium for you to reach new customers where other providers may not know that they can tap into this in that way. So it really, really helps differentiate yourself and really goes a long way with converting a new customer here. And so those are a lot of reasons why you should advertise on podcasts. And like I mentioned before, generally speaking, it can be a bit time consuming. It can be expensive to go show by show. But with Audiogo, we make it really easy for you to tap into this opportunity and really test out the medium, see if this is something that works for you and your franchise network. And so with Audiogo, there's really 3 easy steps to get started. You create an account with us, and then you set your budget and schedule. You tell us how much you want to spend, how long you want the campaign to run. You either upload an audio ad or we can provide one for you, and I'll touch on more of that in a moment. We have all the services that you need to create a great audio campaign and podcast advertising campaign. And then lastly, you just target your audience. You tell us where you want to deliver your ads, what type of content they're listening to. You can even say, hey, we want to reach people in these 3 zip codes who are male, female, who are listening on their mobile devices, who are listening to true crime podcasts, technology related podcasts, society and culture related podcasts, business related podcasts, history, whatever it may be. You can be very, very specific about who you want to reach. Like I'm mentioning here, we can reach whoever you want, wherever they are, on whatever they're listening to. So not only do we have the ability to reach people specifically on podcasts, but also you can reach people across streaming music. And we have over 80 different advanced targeting options to reach the right listener for your franchise. So again, this could be different podcast categories. Like I mentioned there, this could also be, you could reach people who are homeowners, who are car owners, who are tech enthusiasts, who are interested in the nature and the outdoors. We have a variety of different options. You can really think of any other sort of ad platform out there. We have very similar targeting criteria and can be very specific about the audience that we reach. And so one thing that I kind of touched on before, part of this, of course, it's audio advertising. So we'll need an audio ad. And we actually have everything that you need to do that. We realized early on that, not every single franchise or franchisee has a professional, recording studio or radio ad just lying around ready to go. And so we've actually partnered with a professional voiceover group. They do ads for the big brands, the Coca-Colas of the world. And so we're able to bring your brand to life with a professional audio ad by a professional voiceover actor. We'll get that back to you in 24 hours, all just for $10. So really, you can kind of look at us as your personal recording studio, and other franchises that we work with, they turn to us to really help for that localization piece. We come up with a templatized script that is approved by the brand, and then the local franchisee can input their phone number, their address, their information, and then they can have a great sounding ad that we could then share with the community, reach people listening on podcasts in the area, on streaming music, and really have that great experience and really have that reach that new customer. So we have all the resources that you need here. We can even help with display banner ads if need be as well. That's another piece of it. But yeah, consider us really like your personal recording studio. We'll get those ads back to you quickly, and you can always revise them in case you need to make changes. One of the last pieces that I'll mention here, as I kind of touched on, one of the biggest perks of programmatic, particularly with Audiogo, is the affordability. So there's no long-term contracts with us. There's no tech fees. There's no annual commitments, anything like that. You could test out Audiogo for as little as $250. And so that's the minimum amount to advertise with us on streaming music and podcasts. And even at that level, we're going to be able to deliver about 13,800 of these 30-second audio ads to the audience of your choosing. So a lot of great exposure there. And actually, you'll see towards the end of this, we have a special offer for folks who are joining today. And so it's really easy to get started. And we have a few minutes here. So I'm actually just going to jump into the platform and show you firsthand how to do that. And so I'm going to switch over here. Okay, pardon me while I swap out. Okay, great. So this is the Audiogo platform firsthand. So here you can see it's really easy to get set up. You click sign up on the top right. It's free to make an account. It always will be. So we just recommend that at the very least, you might as well sign up, poke around, see if this is something that works for your franchise brand or for you directly as a franchisee. We work, of course, with both franchises and franchisees all the time from the IFA. But assuming you're good to go, all you need to do is hit login. Takes you to your dashboard. Now, this is an example of a campaign. If you were to be running one, really everything you need with Audiogo to get started is in the top right here under Create New Campaign. So you click that link, that'll take you here. Similar to other platforms, from here, really all you need to do is start filling in the form. So go ahead and drop in a campaign name. Go ahead and select your budget. As I mentioned, you could do as little as 250 with us here. We also have these easy to use buttons. You tell us how long you want the campaign to run for. You could even choose the day and time of the week that the ads run. Let's say you want to reach people in rush hour traffic, for example. Then down below here, this is where you upload your audio ads if you have them. We do allow you to upload podcast ads specifically, just ads with no background music. But in case you don't have anything, no problem. We can create all that for you. So like I mentioned, just for $10, we can create a professional studio recorded audio ad. So here's where you drop in your script. Choose the language of your ad. We can actually create scripts and create ads in English or Spanish and can reach Spanish speakers directly on the platform, but it's going to default to English. You make a selection for the voice type of the ad. And then lastly, any background music. If you are planning to run ads on streaming music as well, you can choose from a variety of options here and preview them. And we'll also go ahead and create a podcast friendly ad for you for free. So that's what's going to run on podcasts. And basically we take out the background music, make it a good listener experience there. Last piece is any instructions that you have for the voice actors. And if you want it to be, hey, make this really excited and energetic, or maybe make it a bit more professional and serious, any of that, go ahead and drop that in here. Hit submit. That'll go to our team. We'll produce that ad in about 24 hours or one business day. And then when you go back to the campaign here, you'll get an email letting you know that the ad's ready. You just go ahead and take a listen to preview it. And if you want to use it, you hit continue. If not, there will be an option for you to request a revision for that audio ad. So you're not stuck with the first go around. You can absolutely revise it until we get it right. So most people are very happy with the first edition, but you do have that flexibility. So again, consider us like your personal recording studio. We can create templatized scripts to share with your franchisees, whatever you may need. We can even do group discounts for franchisees. So please do send me a note after this. Happy to connect on how we can kind of get everything set up for you like we've done with other franchises. Then down below here is the display banner section. So you may know this from streaming audio yourself. Oftentimes there's a display banner that you can tap or click to learn more. So definitely include these. They're free of charge. They don't count towards your impressions or cost anything additional. So we absolutely recommend including these banners. And then this is where you drop in the website that we send people, where they tap or click to learn more. And then lastly, and kind of most importantly, is the targeting options that you have here. And so you can target listeners based off their location. You can go as wide as the state level down to the zip code and pretty much everything in between there. And it could be multiple zip codes. It could be cities and counties, multiple cities, any combination that you need. You just enter in what you're looking for. For example, I'm typing in Los Angeles here. You'll see the relevant options, the city, county, greater areas. You just make your selection. And then on the right, you'll be able to see kind of where you stand for your campaign, how many ads we're going to deliver, how many people we're going to reach. So you're in the know all the way through. Last couple of things I'll point out here. We have device type, gender, age group targeting. You can make your selections here. You could also choose to reach people based off of their behavioral segments. So that's, I slightly touched on their interest or status. Under interest, variety of different options here. People who are car enthusiasts, who are car buyers, interested in cooking, fashion, finance. Even we have things like insurance as well. A lot of different options here. Same goes on the status side. We have things like parents, pet owners, people who are married, homeowners, people with higher income, whatever it may be. So those are the behavioral segment options. Of course, today we're talking specifically about podcasts. And so like I said, we're one of the few platforms out there for $250 that you can actually advertise directly on podcasts. And so on the bottom right, you'll see our podcast, and it's all broken out by category. So you can reach people who are tuning into art-related podcasts, business, comedy, history, health. We have things related to music, things related to politics, sports, TV and film, technology, true crime, variety of different options in here. And so this is how you're going to specifically target podcasts, and how you could tap into that for your franchisees is through this targeting here. So that's how you set that up. It really, I know we kind of touched on every step of the way, but it really does take just a few minutes to get everything set up for you. And then all you need to do is hit schedule, and then your campaign goes live at the date that you set. So it really is that easy for us to advertise on podcasts. So I'll jump back into this here and just kind of wrap everything up. So thanks again for everyone for taking the time here. I'll go ahead and pause for questions, and I'll actually scoot over to this screen here, just because we are offering a sort of special offer for taking the time today. We really do appreciate your time. And so in here, you'll actually get $100 in free ad credits. The first 50 folks who sign up with us can use this code IFA Go Web 1221-100. So please do take advantage of that. We can also talk there. We have some holiday specials going around. You may even be able to get your first campaign up and live for free, or for a fraction of the cost, and get some free audio ads out there. So please do reach out to me. Happy to help out, get you set up, and just would love for you to test out the platform. So I'll leave my contact information here. This is my email, ian.murphy@audiogo.com. So feel free to reach out. And it looks like we have a couple questions. So I'm going to go ahead and address those. So please do, if you have other questions, drop them in the chat. Happy to answer them. We do have about 5 or so minutes here for questions. All right. Good question from Charles, asking about, so programmatic utilizes dynamic insertion, but they are not necessarily different methods, correct? Yes, you're absolutely right, Charles. That's a great question. So dynamic insertion is really the kind of the technology, if you will, that's behind programmatic. So we just wanted to kind of explain what those are in case you do come across those terms. But yes, programmatic takes advantage of dynamically inserting ads into streams. Absolutely right there. Yep. And that's really what differs from host-read. Like I kind of touched on, host-read, they're great. If you can come across a good deal there, I absolutely would recommend it. And some folks do both host-read and programmatic podcast ads. But the one reason why buyers are shifting a bit away from host-read is truly just the cost and time it takes to set things up. With programmatic, you can be on other podcasts for as little as with us, as little as $250. So that's kind of why there's kind of a more of an appetite for programmatic in the podcast space to really get that reach. So great question. Oh, great. We have a few more coming in. Looks like from Eleanor, do you have a list of podcasts who use your advertisements? Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. So we actually have a network of about 10 plus podcast specific publishers, not to mention some of our other publishers that have podcast content, but these are groups like Podcast One, Spreaker, Washington Post, things like that. And so we run across 7,500 different podcasts. So please do follow up with me, Eleanor, at this email address here. I could send you a list offline and we could talk through kind of where your ads will go and the different shows available. So please do reach out to me there. But yeah, it's about 7,500 different shows that you can tap into across those categories that I mentioned. All right, so Charles had another great question here, explanation of impressions versus downloads. Yeah, and so in terms of when we're talking about impressions, at least on the Audiogo side, we're referring to how many ads we're going to deliver, how many 30-second audio ads we're going to deliver. So that's an impression. Is one ad delivered is an impression. So you can imagine multiple people can hear, or a person can hear an ad multiple different times, and that would be multiple impressions for that one unique listener. So that's kind of how that works. Impressions versus downloads. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question correctly. Downloads, typically, if we're talking about podcasting, that may be related to a user downloading a podcast. That's possible. I guess I'm not entirely sure what we mean by downloads, as these are, I guess I should clarify, these are typically people who are streaming music and podcasts. So those ads are going on streaming as well. So hopefully that clarifies that, Charles. You can shoot me an email if you'd like. We can absolutely talk offline. Another great question from Eleanor. What kind of analytics do we receive after a campaign is finished? Yeah, good question. Actually, yeah, so I don't have the time to show it today, but really you could think of this with Audiogo. You can almost think of it similar to like a Google or Facebook ads, but for audio. So in terms of the reporting that you get, you're going to be able to see a breakdown across all the targeting you select, how many ads we're delivering to people in certain areas that you chose for targeting, across different device types, across different age groups. If we do choose podcast categories, you'll see how many ads are delivered and how many people are hearing them across the different categories there. You'll also get daily impressions and daily trends charts. So you'll get all kinds of reporting to kind of understand kind of how the ads are performing, kind of who's engaged with the ads and that sort of thing. Angela, do you have a testimonial from current users? Yeah, I'm not sure if Angela, if you were part of the IFA at the time, but we did a webinar, I think it was a few months back, time flying these last couple of years, but we did do one with a Go Minis, a franchise that we work with closely, who have had a good experience. We've worked with other IFA franchises as well, and continue to do so, and we work with other franchises outside of that network. The good thing about Audiogo is really, as a franchisee, it's something that is relatively affordable. It's easy to get set up, and even as a franchise brand at the brand level, our platform is really well suited for helping local marketers that may need to tap into a national co-op fund or MDF funds, or get pre-approved messaging from the brand. So we're very well suited to help out there, Angela. So please do shoot me an email. We could talk through your needs, and I could share some testimonials and that sort of thing. That's great. And then there was one more question around if they asking about behavioral segments versus the podcast categories. And that's a good question. Kind of where do your ads go if you choose that? And so with behavioral segments, those are really listeners' interests or status. So that's how we're basically choosing to target them a different way, but they're still listening to music, they're still listening to podcasts. But with Audiogo, if you did want to specifically target podcasts, and again, I can't stress enough that we're one of the few platforms out there where you can tap into podcast advertising for $250. It's almost unheard of. And so if you did want to do that, that's directly at those podcast categories at the very bottom of that form. So hopefully that kind of explains that. And so I know we're almost at time. Looks like that's all the questions. Of course, if anyone else has any questions, please do send me a note, ian.murphy@audiogo.com. Happy to help you get set up. And then again, first 50 signups from this, we'll get this able to get $100 off, and we have some other great coupons going at the moment. So definitely take advantage of it. You could lock in the coupon and start this, next year, whatever you need. But yeah, please do reach out. Would love to work with you. And Lauren, I'm not sure if we want to turn it back over to you, but that's everything that,
Yes.
that I had.
Great. Thank you so much, Ian. This was excellent content and excellent feedback from all of you. We really do appreciate it. Again, this webinar was recorded, and along with the presentation deck will appear on our website early this evening. You'll be able to find that at community.franchise.org. Thank you very much again to Ian and the Audiogo team. And again, thank you to everyone for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day and stay safe and healthy. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Lauren.